I see this anti-boomer theme sometimes from people. There's this thing where people seem to copy and parrot over the internet. And a lot of times I think that they just see something in a video or somebody making comments, and then other people just kind of repeat it. And it's like a kite. It picks up a little bit of wind and then it's flying. So the real discussion is about generational wealth disappearing, buying power disappearing, and the new generation simply getting poorer. I've discussed how there are foundational reasons why, but what seems to keep cropping up is this idea, just like any other subject that becomes subject to the long arm of misinformation this day and age. It's this idea that the reason why you're faring less well financially is because of the previous generation. This is absurd. Some of the biggest lies in the world, usually there's a little bit of truth, but most of it is a lie, it's misinformation. So do you want the little bit of truth? I'll give you the little bit of truth later in the video. But for now, let's focus on the fact that I've had the opportunity to talk to people in all walks of life, because we've lived abroad 8 years over in Ecuador, and when we were helping Americans that were moving to Ecuador find a reasonably priced, locally priced rental, I would get to know them and they would tell me stories. And these people are retirement age, the age that you're being told is stealing your wealth. And they're going over there abroad just so they can afford their retirement. So they stole your wealth so that they must have went to Vegas and gambled it away, because they don't seem to have it, some of them either. Although there's plenty of wealth to go around and there's plenty of wealthy people. Just saying that a lot of these conversations kind of paint a broad brush about people, and your antennas have to go up anytime we enter into conversations where whole groups of people are painted a certain way. And that would be that boomers stole your retirement. That's ridiculous. It's not possible. There's different kinds of people. Some of them, as I said, are running over there to some cheap country. And if you look at the videos of, retire on $600 over here in this far-flung place and on the globe, they're getting hundreds of thousands of views. So clearly it's hitting a nerve that the cost of living is getting out of hand, and especially people in retirement. The cost of living for people in retirement is a pain point, or else these videos wouldn't be getting so many views. So that's the first thing. The next thing is that obviously inflation hits everyone. It's just that clearly even what used to be considered semi-wealthy. I know when I was a bit younger, a six-figure income was a darn good income, but now we're hearing that 40% of people that make $100,000 a year or six figures are living paycheck to paycheck. That's mind-boggling to me. I can't even fathom something like that. And of course, it doesn't mean that everyone that's earning $100,000 a year, well, of course, if it's 40%, that means that 60% of people earning $100,000 a year or more are not living paycheck to paycheck. And so that's consistent with the thought these ideas may apply to some people, but they don't apply generally to all people. And that right there is enough of an explanation to understand why, quote unquote, boomers have not stolen anything from the next generation. So one has to ask himself, there's two things here. Let me know your thoughts. One is that this is a method of dividing people. Anytime you blame something on a whole group of people, well, who wants to do that? There's a lot of that going on in American culture. You know what I'm talking about. There's this idea that previous generations have to be blamed for something. And what is the end result of this kind of conversation? And what it leads to is animosity between people and some sort of school of thought that says, well, the progeny of that generation, it just pits people against one another. So it causes division between people, and misinformation is used in order to create that division. So one has to ask himself, what is the agenda of those that put out this misleading information that pits people against one another? Why would that kind of agenda exist, and who would be responsible for it, and what do they have to gain by it? Divide and conquer comes to mind. The next thing is, everyone can create wealth by being more self-sufficient and putting an effort in being a producer instead of a consumer. At the very least, producing what you consume and as much as possible of it, and then only consuming a portion of what you produce, and therefore having an excess left over. In this day and age, it's called saving and investment. So the real thief the truth is that our purchasing power is what's disappearing. Generations become poorer because each generation accepts the lie that the means of production must be centrally planned and controlled, and therefore those that plan and control not only the means of production, but they also control the means of exchange for that production, thereby creating a monopoly in all wealth, in the ownership of wealth. You will own nothing and ... I'm sure a lot of you guys see through this kind of misinformation out there. When we rely on one source for our sustenance, such as an employer, then that source has an unlimited amount of power to put you at 100% unemployment. As I read the other day, 175,000 people are being laid off soon, and I'm seeing the price of real estate soften quite a bit, so that whole industry is also going to have a contraction. But this is something that happens periodically, and so we learn to minimize it, and yet it's a total result of the monetary system that we were born in. Because an agrarian society doesn't have to deal with unemployment. When you look at the Amish, for example, they don't have an unemployment problem. They also don't have, or shouldn't have, a consumerist problem. To be clear, being self-sufficient requires an effort into doing things that perhaps people aren't too interested in doing, like raising your own chickens. But that's what barter and interpersonal exchange is all about. If you don't want to raise chickens, but you prefer doing apple trees, you can take a box of your apples and go swap it out for eggs from the guy that raises chickens. See? And so the internet has a way of perpetuating false and misleading information. How do we get out of this? Well, one way we do this is by talking about it, and that's why I make these videos. There are other subjects where this very same methodology is used. In other words, there's an inherent structural problem in society, and a different generation or type of people is blamed, whether it's people with this kind of color skin, or people with, from this kind of culture, or from these countries, or from, got to find somebody to blame so that we can pit people against one another, divide and conquer. And so the antidote to that is truthful information and love your neighbor. And there's a strategy that is used, a manipulation strategy, if you will, that says if you distract people, it's called the red herring. You can distract people with a different subject that makes it sound like that's the issue. and so that people can keep their focus on the distraction. And this is part of that school of thought that I say, in my opinion, when you talk about only what the headlines tell you, you're basically being told what to think. And so that we need to start thinking for ourselves a little bit more and digging deeper into things we're being told, you know, to think about, or even how to think about them. It's not just how to think about that issue, it's whether the issue is even being presented correctly or not to begin with. So that instead of saying to ourselves, why is my purchasing power so poor, we're distracted into blaming someone, a group of people, and that gives us a sense that if we blame someone and argue or what have you, that somehow we have some sort of menial control over the issue, which you don't. Not by arguing or focusing on the distraction anyway. The way that we have control over the issue is to get educated about why you don't have purchasing power, and why even people that make $100,000 a year, 40% of them, are living paycheck to paycheck. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for coming to the channel. Have a wonderful day.